if you would. I want to bring in Bill Barr, the former Attorney General, twice Attorney General in the Bush administration and the Trump administration. As we watch this play out, I know you've been watching it closely this afternoon as well. Bill, your thoughts. Welcome. Good to have you here. And your thoughts on this.
Well, my thoughts are pretty much the same as they've been for the last week or so. I haven't heard anything that suggests there's something new in this indictment that wasn't anticipated. If there is, then we'll have to respond to that when we see it. But I think what Brett said is absolutely right. Prosecution should always involve a measure of discretionary judgment where you weigh the public interest as a whole. And even before I became Attorney General the second time, I said in relation to Mueller's investigation that before we go off on a president, a sitting president, or a former president, there should be clear evidence of a real crime. It shouldn't be a debatable crime. The evidence should be strong. And also, this is not just by virtue of his prior office, but he's a candidate in the current election. So this is a charging decision that affects our current national politics. And judgment there, it seems to me, and prosecutorial discretion should commend caution in this circumstance. And as I've said, this appears to be just a pathetically weak case that is, I think, demonstrably wrong on the law, which explains why the Department of Justice, even after I left office, has never pursued this idea of campaign finance problem.
It was passed on by the Southern District of New York, passed on by the Federal Election Commission, this case. So, you talk about prosecutorial discretion. It looks like the next level, the next opportunity for that discretion is going to fall on this judge, Marshawn, when he looks at whether or not to dismiss this case, if he feels that it is, in your words, pathetically weak. What goes into that part of this process, Bill?
Well, I think it'll be largely a legal judgment as to whether there's really probable cause to believe that this falsification of records was done to defraud anybody. And second, whether or not this involves the campaign finance law, which I don't think it does. And I think any idea that this defrauds the voters, as Andy just said a moment ago, is simply wrong. That doesn't create a crime.
But so if that's the case, and you're Judge Marshawn, who has successfully prosecuted another financial case with the Trump organization, and you look at this, how do you weigh that? Do you expect that because he's in this courtroom, he's just going to say, no, we're not going to dismiss this charge? It's been brought by DA Bragg?
No, I hope he exercises his role as a judge and serves as a screening mechanism for this kind of overreach by a prosecutor. I'm not optimistic he will, but we'll see.
So the other issues that we expect to be brought up here are change of venue. Jonathan Turley said, although that is usually something that is not acted upon, he said there might be an argument for that here. What do you think?
Yeah, I thought that was one of the stronger arguments. I agree with Jonathan on that. But again, I'm not holding my breath that there's going to be any change in that.
We also have talked about the larger scope of some of these other processes that are underway. And the one that you have said looks the most problematic for the former president is the MarALago classified document case that's under Jack Smith, the special counsel right now. Talk to us a little bit about your thinking on that one.
Well, I think the issue there isn't the taking of the documents. I think the issue there is what happened after the department asked for them back, which they are government property, and also then subpoenaed them. And from the government's actions, I believe that they probably have evidence of efforts to mislead the government, and they're trying to determine whether Trump was behind that and was involved in obstructing their efforts to obtain the documents. And that would be viewed as a fairly serious problem. But again, discretion would come into play there as well. And I think Trump did not hurt himself initially by his bombastic statements about and his truculence about the documents and making some what were perceived as threats about public, uproar if the government was to pursue him. But on the other hand, since that, you've had Biden and Pence involved with document problems. So that would cut in favor of exercising discretion, because otherwise you could have the appearance of two systems of justice and two different standards.
But it sounds like you're suggesting that the difference is the issue of obstruction, not of having documents in your possession.
Right.
So if there was manipulation in the form of this letter that went back to the archives saying everything, we gave you everything, you've got it all. And then if they can track something that came post that shows that there were things that were moved and clearly that they understood they had possession of, that's the issue here. That's the obstruction, that at least as far as we can tell, right?
That's right. And the argument for pursuing it within the Department of Justice would be the argument, look, how can we protect all our national secrets and require that our employees and people involved in sensitive programs protect the information if we turn a blind eye to something like this? So I'm sure there's going to be some pressure to pursue that case if they have strong evidence.
So one of the things that has come up here is whether or not this judge would put a gag order in place. And we thought that the president might speak on his way into the courtroom. They were running late. He looked quite serious, as you would expect in this situation as he walked in. Do you think he will take advantage, as we've been told, of the opportunity to say something on the way out? And would you advise it?
Yeah, I think he'll take the opportunity, and I think it's fine if he does. I mean, I think it's important for him to get his message out, and I think it would be very bad to impose a gag order on him, especially in the circumstances of this case where he's a candidate in an election.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.